This video is to introduce you to a new concept called logarithms. It's important to first start with the definition of a logarithm. Logarithms were introduced by a mathematician named John Napier in the early 17th century. And he invented them as a means of simplifying calculations. They were rapidly adopted by scientists, engineers, and others to perform computations more easily, using slide rules and logarithm tables. We now, on our graphing calculators, have a button dedicated to log. However, in the early years mentioned, they used these logarithm tables to do these computations. We have been working with exponential equations, and we just did a lesson on using the common base and exponent properties to solve them. However, this is not always possible when you have more advanced equations, exponential equations, and that is when we rely on this new concept, logarithms. It's important to also realize how over here we have the graph of an exponential function, a basic exponential function, and down here we have a basic graph of a logarithmic function. And since these graphs reflect over the line y equals x, whenever you have graphs that reflect over the line y equals x, they are referred to as inverse functions, functions that undo each other. Therefore, the logarithmic function is the inverse of the exponential function. If we write the general form of an exponential function, let's say as y equals b to the x power, where y is your output and b is your base, and x is the exponent that we are using, or the input, that's your general form of an exponential function. Its inverse, then, would be written as x equals b to the y power, which is a confusing equation. It's more confusing than the equation that was mentioned above it. This is the inverse of that other equation. The inverse would be x equals b to the y power. Or an easier way of writing it would be using logarithms. That's when these are useful. And that would correspond to, these would be equivalent. That would correspond to be y is equal to the log, which stands abbreviation for logarithm, base of b, and then of x. And it is read as y is equal to the log base b of x. An easy way that I learned to convert between log form and exponent form is the following. It's a mnemonic in which you have your log, down here you have your subscript, and that's the base. Back on the same line as the log abbreviation is your answer, the output. We're going to use the word answer. And it's equal to the exponent. And corresponding to that would be the exponent form. So we would call this the log form, and we would call this the exponent form. So if we're using these concepts, the exponent form would be the base raised to the exponent would equal the answer.